This is Michael B. Legend, and this is my 7 points action plan to end insecurity in Nigeria. The journey of ending insecurity or any challenge in any nation is the collective responsibility of the people, but the ultimate responsibility of those whom we elect into power, most times primarily for that purpose. And it is my hope that the powers that be will take this video as a compliment to whatsoever they already have going on, which obviously is challenged based on the realities on ground. The insecurity is alive and so far is well, but it is time for us to overcome this menace that has given us a bad image in the international community and that has impoverished our people, put many people in fear. People are sleeping with one eye open. That does not look like what a nation should be. It is very important that we all come together and fight this menace. However, history will hold those in power responsible if they fail to do everything within and beyond, if possible, their powers to ensure that Nigerians have a good life, that Nigerians can be Nigerians, and enjoy the dividends of this nation. So we go straight into it. The number one is the telecommunications gap. Right now, Nigeria's broadband penetration sits at just about 54%, and that's very bad. We are looking at a minimum of 95% coverage. You can't have half of Nigeria in broadband darkness. That means nearly half of the country is still dealing with massive digital divide. When we look at this through the lens of national security, those gaps become major blind spots. Criminal activities often thrive in areas where there is zero network coverage and no way to call for help. That is why you hear 50-something people were marched into the forest, 100 and so people were marched into the forest, 30-something people, students were marched into the forest. This is why scaling up our telecommunications infrastructure is no longer just about economic growth. It's a major security discussion. It is a vital weapon in the fight against insecurity. We need to aggressively deploy more network sites to eliminate these communication dead zones. As we expand, we also have to protect what we build. Right now, telecom infrastructure is a major target for sabotage and vandalism. When criminals cut fiber cables or attack towers, they are not just disrupting internet access, they are effectively cutting off our security emergency lines and blinding our response systems. That is why the government's move to label these assets as critical national infrastructure came at the right time. It is my hope that that title will reflect in practice. If we want to secure Nigeria, we have to connect Nigeria, and we must protect the networks that keep us safe. Part 2 will be the energy backup plan, what I call solarization. Network infrastructure is only half the battle because digital systems need constant power to survive. This is where the authorities managing our national grid, the power companies, need to wake up from their slumber. We cannot secure our communities when our national power grid is constantly in a state of collapse. If the grid is too weak to keep the lights on, we need a backup plan. And ironically, the government has already given us the template to use. Recently, the presidency faced heavy criticism for spending a massive 17 billion naira to power Aso Rock. They budgeted 10 billion naira initially and added another 7 billion naira, this year for what I call the solarization of the villa. They defended this cause by saying a 47 billion naira annual electricity bill was simply not sustainable. If solarizing Aso Rock is the solution to save the seat of power from grid's failure, that exact template, I believe, must be replicated in our local communities and is indeed not rocket science. If it makes sense to give the villa an independent solar mini grid, it makes more sense to give vulnerable communities that same energy backup plan. A solarized community means lit streets, functioning security hubs, and active communication towers, even when the national grid, collapses. We cannot protect the people in the dark. If the government can find billions to secure power for themselves, they must deploy that same energy to keep our communities illuminated and secure. Part 3, the scale of asset and the 9-man standby fleet strategy. Every single state in Nigeria must get to a point where it can account for a massive permanent fleet of hardware. We need a minimum of 10 fighter jets, 20 attack helicopters, and 200 armored combat vehicles per state. That's 2,070 armed men nationwide. Remember, this has nothing to do with the existing security infrastructure in every state. This is a 2-year insecurity elimination plan. But hardware is useless without immediate human readiness. This is why each of these machines must have a dedicated 9-man joint task force assigned to it. Whether they are military, police, or special forces, this quarter guard equivalent must be on standby 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If a security threat pops up anywhere, that machine and its 9-man crew must be moving instantly. No delays, no waiting for orders, no waiting for my oga at the top, just immediate tactical response. Part 4, the 247 air rotation and show of force. We have to stop trying to fight modern insecurity with empty skies. You can't do that. Your sky cannot be empty when you are fighting insecurity. The security architecture across our states must get to the point where it feels like we are at war every single day. Peace is maintained through an overwhelming show of force. You need to send a message daily to the bad people. To achieve this, we must have a minimum of 3 surveillance aircraft in the air over every state. Take note, minimum 24 hours a day. This requires a flawless, robust tactical rotation plan. As one fleet finishes each shift and descends to retire, the next fleet has already ascended to take over the airspace. The criminal elements on the ground must constantly look up and see that the sky belongs to the state. It's when they know that the eye of the state and that of the sky never blinks, the incentive to continue to commit crime naturally deflates and depreciates. Number 5, the 247 situation rooms, the brain of the operation. To coordinate this massive fleet and continuous air rotation, you need a central nervous system. Every single state must build a state-of-the-art, fully functional situation room. This cannot be a room used just during elections or major crises. This must be a command center that never goes to sleep. It must run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, blending live satellite feeds, drone footages, telecom data, and field intelligence onto one screen. When the skies are constantly moving, the ground teams are on standby, and the situation room is always awake, you achieve absolute situational awareness. Number 6 is the tech infrastructure, equipment, names, and costs. To make this 247 surveillance a reality, we must deploy specific modern technology that is built for this kind of terrain. First, we look at fixed wing aerial surveillance, like the Diamond DA-62 MPP. The Nigerian Air Force already uses this, and Oyo State recently approved over 7 billion naira to acquire 2 of them. They burn very little fuel, but they are cheap to maintain, and they can spot a target from high altitude, day or night. The next one is that we must heavily scale up our unmanned combat drones, specifically the Turkish-made Bayraktar TB2. The Nigerian Army recently acquired 43 of these combat drones for operations in the Northwest under Project Guardian. A single TB2 system costs roughly $5 million, but it can hover over a border or a forest for up to 27 hours non-stop. Finally, we need to look at heavy long-range drones like the Chinese Winglong 2. These are equipped with satellite communication links, giving them a massive cross-country operational range to track bandits across state lines. If we distribute these assets across all geopolitical zones, we move from reactive policing to absolute aerial dominance. That is what it means when we say state power. We have the tech, we know the cost, and we need the political will to deploy it at scale. Number 7, moving combat trainings into the forests, which I call the ownership strategy. Finally, we have to change where and how our forces operate. We must completely move military and combat trainings out of our cities directly into the forest. For too long, deep forests and vast bushlands have been abandoned, allowing criminal elements to claim them as safe havens. By shifting our intense combat training to these exact terrains, we execute a massive permanent show of force. It is an active ownership strategy. Our troops shouldn't just be visiting the forest for ad hoc operations. They should be living, training, and dominating those spaces. When the military occupies the forest permanently through continuous rotational training circles, we push the enemies out completely. We reclaim our land, we project total authority, and we ensure that there is nowhere else left for insecurity to survive.